السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أرحب أنا زيد الرقيب بالحضور الكرام ممثلا عن المركز الوطني للتعليم الإلكتروني من العاصمة الرياض بالمملكة العربية السعودية. يحتفل المركز الوطني للتعليم الإلكتروني بمناسبة الأسبوع العالمي للتعليم المفتوح بالندوة الافتراضية بعنوان الموارد المشتركة: أثر الموارد التعليمية المفتوحة وفعاليتها، حيث سيناقش الخبراء تأثير الموارد التعليمية المفتوحة OER المشتركة على التجارب التعليمية ومنهجيات قياس فعالية الموارد التعليمية المفتوحة وضمان جودتها. كذلك سيعرض الخبراء نماذجاً علمية ناجحة لاستخدام الموارد التعليمية المشتركة والتحديات وأفضل الممارسات لضمان استدامة تبني الموارد التعليمية المفتوحة وإمكانية استخدامها. وأخيراً الأطر التنظيمية للإبداع التعاوني والترخيص وتوسيع نطاق الموارد التعليمية المفتوحة. وللتنويه ستكون الترجمة الفورية للغة العربية ولغة الإشارة متاحة خلال هذه الندوة، وبإمكانكم الآن الضغط على أيقونة الترجمة أسفل الشاشة. Warm greetings from the National E-Learning Center in Riyadh, capital of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I'm Zaid Ragib. We are delighted to welcome each participant to today's webinar on shared resources, impact and efficacy of open educational resources as part of the Open Education Week 2025. In this webinar, we will conduct a formal examination of the impact of shared open educational resources on learning experiences. We will analyze effective methodologies for assessing OER quality and efficacy, and present case studies demonstrating measurable success achieved through their implementation. Furthermore, we will address the challenges and best practices associated with the sustainable adoption and utilization of OER. Finally, we will explore policy frameworks designed to facilitate the collaborative creation, licensing, and scaling of OER initiatives. It is with great pleasure to have with us today the Dean of E-Learning and Digital Transformation at Shagra University, Dr. Saleh Al-Harbi, who will be moderating this discussion. We are also delighted to welcome the distinguished panelists, Ms. Tan Mai, Senior Economist at the World Bank, Mr. Kurt Newton, Director of MIT OpenCourseware at MIT Open Learning, Mr. Edward Zerkor, Vice President of Engineering at Axim Collaborative, and Mr. Juan Pablo Flores, Program Manager at GitHub Education. We thank these distinguished speakers for joining us today. So without further delay, we hand over the virtual floor to our moderator, Dr. Saleh Al-Harbi.
شكرا زيد، الله يعطيكم العافيه جميعا، والسلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته. كل عام وانتم بخير وتقبل الله منا ومنكم صالح الاعمال. It's with great pleasure to be moderating this session today for Open Education, or within this event of Open Education Week, having an education that's accessible by everyone and with shared resources that are being created from different participants around the world to serve one goal, having access to the education, quality education from around the world. We have this discussion today. So what are we going to discuss today is that with open shared resources or open shared material that has been created within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or around the world, we need to understand or dig deep on how they are going to be benefit to the educational sector for individuals themselves, to the creator of the content, and what are the policies and case studies around that. So it's with great pleasure to have our distinguished guest. So the structure of this discussion is going to be, I will be introducing each of the panelists, and they are going to do a brief presentation, like for 10 to 15 minutes, followed by another presentation for the other speaker, and then towards the end we will be having a panel discussion and taking some questions from the audience. So without further ado, let me introduce our first distinguished guest. So we will have Tan Mai, Senior Economist from the World Bank, And she's at the Middle East and North Africa Education and Practice of the World Bank. She has an extensive experience in managing education programs in several countries in the MENA and Africa and East Asia region. They span over different experience from different perspectives. So I'll be happy to introduce her to share her knowledge on open education resources and how can we benefit. And just to touch back on the themes that has been mentioned, what are the takeaways that we are expecting from this? What are the impacts of open shared resources or open education, its efficacy and the implementation case studies? So without further ado, the mic is yours, or the floor is yours, Tan, to share your presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arabi. Good evening and good afternoon for some colleagues who may be in the same time zone as me. As Dr. Arabi introduced, my name is Tang Mai. I'm a senior economist at the Middle East and North Africa Education Practice of the World Bank. I'm very delighted to join the webinar today, and the topic of shared resources is very, very important to the World Bank. As a global development agency, we believe in the power of knowledge and the impacts that it can create when it's shared, right? And we have an open knowledge repository where we put all our publications, our research, and our data for public use. But today, my contribution comes from our ongoing work with the National E-Learning Center in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We've been honored to be tasked with conducting a case studies of the future ecosystem in the kingdom. And the objective of the case studies are twofold. One is to examine the future ecosystems and as a model for e-learning system, highlighting its contribution to the national development goals, its alignment with the labor market's demands, its achievements, as well as potential. But we also hope that through the case studies, we can provide some actionable lessons for other nations and other systems that are also seeking to leverage technology to empower learners in an evolving global landscape. So the future, let me just, sorry. So the future ecosystem is basically an integrating system that bring together the governing bodies, the regulatory bodies, the service providers, and the beneficiaries, right? And the system really strives to really build trust in terms of enhancing the reliability of the e-learning system, to really integrate, to be the enabler and the platform that brings together the providers and the learners to really innovate and bring or strive for the best, learning experience of the learners, to also be flexible and improving the responsiveness of the learning or e-learning with the demands, the changing demands of the economy or of the labor market, and in particular also really focusing on enhancing the efficiency of the system. And within this ecosystem, I think I want to highlight the first initiative for shared resources, which is shared platforms, right? So all the government agencies in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia would be able to open 3 microsites within the FutureX platform, right? And they actually can operate and as these microsites for their own professional development. And but they don't have to actually create their own platform from scratch. So they will actually also benefit from the system support from the FutureX team or the platform team. So that's really the first initiatives on share platform. The second initiatives, and maybe let me, because I don't see my screen, so it's a bit hard, but I think.
If you're showing something on the slide, Tan, it's not showing, so just make sure that.
Sorry. Do you see my screen? I'm sorry for this.
Yes, we can see your screen, but the slides are not moving, so it's not showing.
Oh, okay. I tried to. Sorry for this technology thing. Let me just see. You see the screen now? Yeah.
Yes.
Let me
You may
just
go ahead.
see if it's moving, right?
Yes.
And
Okay.
perhaps
So
you may put your screen on full screen.
yeah,
so
I tried that last time, but it's some issues. Sorry for that, Zed. So let me just maybe carry on, if I may.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah. So the second initiative is really about shared content development, right? And here, this ACES initiative where, the Future X team and the National E-Learning Center actually work with all the universities or interested universities in the kingdom to, develop the foundational courses together. And, the courses are in Arabic language, in Islamic studies, in computer science, and in many other, foundational courses. And the objective is really to enhance efficiency, to reduce content duplication, to ensure there is quality assurance, standards that are built in with the content development. And so right now, there are already 25 universities that are participating in the ACES initiatives, and there are several thousands of courses or the education materials already developed. And these are the universities or the agencies that are participating in these initiatives. The third initiative in terms of share resources is the open education resources platform. And in this case, it's really focusing on providing open Arabic education content, right, with open licensing, but also adhering to digital content quality standards. Right now, there is already 120 agencies in the kingdom participated in the OERX, and 22 agencies actually joined in 2024, in last year. And here is the illustration of the users with more than half or almost half of the users coming from the kingdom, but also a very large number, coming from the United States, and then many other Arabic-speaking countries, but also Germany, right? And in terms of location, you could see that Riyadh and Jeddah, as well as Atlanta, are the locations that there's a lot of interest in accessing the OERX materials in Arabic. And here's just the statistics of the agencies that have made these materials available on the platform. And you could see that 4 universities, really are on the top of the list, as well as the Ministry of Education. A lot of these materials are in videos, form, and there's a lot, and the platform actually captures the views, or the number of views from the platform. So with that, I think I just want to summarize again that our work is still ongoing, but we really want to highlight these 3 very significant and admirable efforts by the National E-Learning Center in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia through its Future X ecosystem, really trying to make the platforms available to all the government agencies, also helping universities to prepare, share content on the foundational courses, as well as making Arabic learning materials available on the internet for public use. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that was very insightful presentation. And if I may summarize, like 3 takeaways or some points that from your your presentation, you were talking about the how can we scale up the open educational resources, and there are 3 things that I want to highlight: the importance of having someone who's regulating this stuff, like what's happening with the Saudi and national learning centers. It boosts the impact of having like OER within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. There were some initiatives before, but having a body who regulates this one boosts this one. And the consumption of OER in Saudi Arabia is huge as well. So that's another takeaway. And we are not only consuming, we are producing OER to the world. So these are the 3 main points that I've learned from your presentation. So thank you very much. And we might come back to that later during the open panel discussion. So let's move to our second guest. It's going to be you, Kurt Newton. Mr. Kurt, the director at MIT OpenCourseWare. And Kurt Newton leads the MIT OpenCourseWare in supporting millions of learners around the world in education every year with freely shared materials with over 2,500 MIT courses. He joined in 2004, so it's been a history with this, and there is a solid background talking about this project. And what's going to be the main points that he's going to be talking about is the bridging the global education divide, so to speak. So within this era. So I think without further ado, the floor is yours, and we're looking forward to enjoying your presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arabi. See my slides good? Okay. Yeah, I'd like to reflect on what we've learned over the past 24 years of doing this open education work, and really the progression from what was a kind of a wild, audacious idea 24 years ago to what's really become, an idea. It's turned into an ethos that's carried, around the world. And what we just heard about the OERX program, I think, is a wonderful, instance of this. Just to recall back in 2001, when we announced this idea, MIT OpenCourseWare, our leadership at MIT took pains to make it clear these are not intended to be sort of full-fledged for-credit replacements for the conventional, university experience, but hopefully these materials become a spur for people around the world, both educators and learners, to make use of these materials and adapt them in their own particular local ways, in ways that made sense to them. And that launch was not only to share the materials from MIT in this fashion, syllabi, lecture notes, and so forth from across the entire MIT curriculum, but to also put a lot of attention into trying to build a movement. And I would say both of these goals have been achieved, beyond, what the wildest expectations of the people who kicked this off 20 years ago. At this point, our analysis is that just looking at MIT OpenCourseWare, we think we've reached almost 500 million people around the world, mostly learners, but also very important educators who use these materials in transforming catalytic ways, to teach their students. And it's not just from MIT OpenCourseWare that's having this reach, but this vibrant, growing ecosystem of people that are doing important different parts of open education work. So we think about infrastructures such as the consortium Open Education Global, Creative Commons licensing, the valuable work that UNESCO is doing, foundations that are backing this work, and then people who are showing up to run with different approaches, such as repositories that we find from the OER Commons, open textbooks, taking that specific form and, building that out as best we can, as evidenced by the open textbook library, or new ways of applying open practices, such as open pedagogy, involving students in the creation of these materials. And then thinking a little bit more broadly than just about education, these very important adjacencies in the open knowledge world. So that might be Wikipedia, it might be open access research, it might be the world's ability to archive and carry forward all of this digital information when, you know, content on the internet online can be fleeting. It may disappear unexpectedly. And so it's very important to have this record carried. All of this together, you know, building this ecosystem. I'm going to say a little bit more about what we have learned over these past years with open courseware and try to highlight things that I think are sort of broadly relevant. It's really been important for us to share materials from across the full curriculum. So not only, say, introductory materials, what we would call in the United States general education classes that are taken by lots of people, but also sharing materials openly from some of the most advanced graduate level seminars offered anywhere in the world. And bringing that out has been really important to the work we do. Also, supporting this work, it takes a lot of effort. And so we've been glad to have a team at MIT who works with the very busy faculty to share these materials. We say to the faculty, you've done your work in teaching the course and creating the materials. Let us, you know, take care of putting it online for you. The core of what we've shared at OpenCourseWare are these artifacts of teaching, lecture notes, videos, and so forth. But also, it's important to recognize the contributions that students are making to this online open commons, and that we have always shared and continue to share examples of their work. This is particularly important for MIT, where so much of the learning is hands-on and project-oriented. But this connects to the growing movement in the open education world towards open pedagogy. I'll also say that the way we've gone about this work has definitely changed over time. We are now able to share much more what we call third-party intellectual property in our materials, you know, images from the research literature and so forth, through policies of claiming fair use, and that will vary from country to country, but that's been really helpful. Sharing pedagogical perspectives from our faculty along with the teaching materials has been important, and without a doubt, much more video now than we did 24 years ago. You know, when we think about the milestones that we've gone through over these 24 years, the initial launch, the scaling up, the figuring out that we were going to share pedagogy materials, not just the teaching materials themselves. These all happen at the same time as other digital forms are happening. So for instance, there was no YouTube when we started. It's gotten much easier to share video. Sharing our materials so that they work on smartphones has become very important. That didn't exist when we launched. Thinking about open education resources from OCW as a complement to what is offered through MOOCs, massive online open courses, has become increasingly important, and so forth. So all of this is happening as part of this sort of broader ecosystem. It's also become increasingly important for us, and I see this happening in a number of other programs, to think about the ways that these materials go elsewhere. We post them on a website, they're used in the original settings, but they also reach people because they can be downloaded. We don't know exactly what will happen with those downloads, but we know, hearing from educators and learners sharing the stories, how important it is that they can carry these materials with them, that they can adapt them, they can translate them into other languages and so forth. And the fact that our videos are shared on other platforms such as YouTube, where so much of the world starts when they want to learn something. One of the most popular searches on YouTube is, how do I, and then fill in the blank. And so the community that's at YouTube, algorithm that is recommending this content has really helped us expand the reach of open educational resources. To date, we're thrilled that 2/3 of the people who come to MIT OpenCourseWare are from outside the United States. It's really exciting to see the global reach and the interest in this material, and millions of people every month are tapping into it. The types of users, the reason why they're coming, this came as a surprise. I think the original thinking about OpenCourseWare was, who would use these materials? Mostly educators. And while educators are very important to that use in terms of sheer numbers, it's kind of an even split between people who are associated with an educational institution and people who are not. And frankly, looking across these different types of users, it's also interesting that everybody shares the same number one reason why they are looking to these materials, simply to improve personal knowledge. And lower priority than that for every one of these users is something that's more specific to their case. Less important to educators to find materials they can actually use in their classroom. They're just curious. People who are professionals who are trying to keep up with their field. Yes, it's also important for them to continue to learn in their field, but their number one reason for using these materials is they just want to keep learning. That deep curiosity that everyone shares has been very important to us to realize, and this drives our work every day. Another thing that's been surprising for us to learn is how diverse the types of users are. You would think, MIT is most of what we teach is fairly advanced, but half of our users do not have a college degree. There are people who are younger and are thinking about college, or there are people who, for whatever reason, did not find they could go to college, but they want to keep learning. And also, people continue to learn throughout their entire lives. 60% of our users are not actually of college age. And so this also drives our ongoing work. Looking specifically at what motivates educators at OpenCourseWare, I mentioned improving personal knowledge is that top one. And then below that level, 15 to 20%, maybe a bit less, these other reasons. Learning new teaching methods. Maybe they'll incorporate these materials into their own course or reference for their students. In our first few years, that last one, helping develop curriculum for my department or school, was a bigger thing. I think this was part of the novelty of someone sharing their whole curriculum. And we know that this is still important, but not as big a deal as it used to be. So last, I wanted to reflect on some broader practices that we've seen that have helped this work, this open education work really take hold. First, what does it mean to cultivate support in different layers? Organizational support is key. At MIT, we've benefited from having backing from the highest levels of our institute leadership, and also be able to have the resources to have a team of people. We have about 20 people at MIT who are working with faculty to make this happen. In many schools around the world, it falls to one or two people in the libraries often. Maybe there's an instructional designer, and creating support mechanisms for faculty to build communities of practice. Those financial incentives and helping people think about this work as balancing their workloads is important as well. We need to keep finding ways to support this work because, as we like to say, making things free for the world isn't free in terms of all of our efforts and the resources it takes. And The open education world, I think, is doing a better job now in understanding the benefits of sharing these materials. You know, we hear from users at MIT why this stuff matters. We share that with faculty. There's great research studies that continue to go on. We're hearing more effort being put on having participation in open education count towards faculty tenure and promotion, which I think is a very important positive benefit. My first 5 years working in open courseware, I spent a lot of time talking with faculty who weren't sure about this. We had a lot of early adopters, but a lot of people who also just weren't quite sure what this would turn into. You know, here's a summary of the kinds of things that we would talk to. Maybe the timing's not right. The course is changing too quickly. I might want to do other things with these materials. It's very important as we do this work in our settings to be able to talk through the concerns. Sometimes it takes months, years even to get people convinced to participate. All told, at MIT, we've managed to get over 2,400 faculty to participate in open courseware. And most of these happened because there were long-term one-on-one conversations and relationships that we built up. So just in closing, I think the impact that we've had, you know, exceeded our wildest expectations in those first few years, you know, and looking around the world at what different projects are doing continues to inspire us all. I'd say we've also learned, especially in the last few years with, for instance, the disruptions from the COVID pandemic, that having these materials open and online is a really valuable thing to just get learners through whatever disruptions life may be facing, might be posing to them. And last, you know, some goals, you know, take time to germinate. We might have to plant them repeatedly. And I will cite what's going on with language translations as an example. We did a lot of work doing manual translations in our first few years. That became too hard. I think we're on the cusp now of a whole new world of language translations. And that's an example of the kind of thing that we are going to, you know, see really changing in the future. So towards this shared ethos of open knowledge, you know, let's do everything we can, keep doing this to build commitments in our institutions, to back this work. It empowers learners in a way that are truly transformative for their lives. And, you know, to recognize all the different forms that this takes, you know, creates just this richer, vibrant ecosystem all the time. And in closing, Open Education Week, I didn't even know this was going to be happening, but this blog post series, 23 good reasons to adopt open education. Please take a look at this if you haven't seen this yet. I think there are 5 posts in now. These are really interesting perspectives from our colleagues around the world, and I think they can help us continue to make the case. And with that, I look forward to continuing a conversation with my panelists here and taking questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kurt, for this insightful presentation. I'd just like to take it back to 2004 when you started, and we're discussing it now, 2025. So the roots and the culture that you've built around this has been like great. So you mentioned something about the start of YouTube, and now we're talking about the Gen AI, agentic AI. So having a solid belief in something and like building a solid base makes it till now. So and you mentioned something about the voluntary faculty participation, 60% of them. So you must have built something on around what's in it for me. So they had to believe in what's in it for them to be able to participate, and this makes it more sustainable. And you answered that question, I think, greatly. So since there is a participation, so it's not easy to get people to buy in sometimes. And the things that you mentioned about the number of participants, like educators are, like professionals are more than students are more than the educators and other professionals that will I mean, reassured that we need to rethink about the formal education practices that we're doing and skill-based employments that's happening now. So we have to rethink about lots of things around policies around formal education as well. So governments need to move around that as well to support this open education and the right to educate and equity for everyone. So thanks for that. And let's move to our next panelist. So I think we will go with you, Edward Zarker, Vice President of Engineering at Axim Collaborative. You'll be talking about the collaborative projects enhancing OER and how universities and governments and private sectors can partner to do and adapt open source learning technology platforms. So looking forward to hearing. And before we start, I would like to ask the participants if they have any questions. Please feel free to post them in the Q&A section so we can take them towards the end. So add your questions in the Q&A section so we can collect them and discuss around that at a later stage. So the floor is yours, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you very much, Dr. El-Harbi. I appreciate your kind introduction, and thank you everyone on the webinar for joining us today. I wanted to start by introducing my organization, Axim Collaborative. We are a nonprofit that was founded in 2021 to make learning more accessible, relevant, and effective. We are the successor of a previous nonprofit that you may have heard of called edX, that was founded by Harvard and MIT in 2012. The original mission of edX was described as making quality education available to everyone, everywhere. You may have remembered that period of time as the MOOC revolution. And I think one of the things that we learned during the process of developing and making MOOCs available to the world was that access was important, but it was not the only thing that was required for learners to have successful outcomes in their educational journeys. So the word Axim is actually a combination of two words in the English language, access and impact. And I think at Axim, we are really focused on not only enabling access, but also ensuring that the support structures and the quality measurements are in place so that impact is created for learners, not simply access, because that's the way that we truly scale kind of the outcomes for learners around the world. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Open edX platform, in case you're not familiar with it. It is the software platform that powers the delivery of MOOCs at thousands of organizations around the world, including edX.org. It's also used in the Kingdom, and it's used as a national platform by many countries. In the United States, it's used by MIT, it's used by Michigan, it's used by Western Governors University. And we estimate that over 98 million learners have taken a course on the Open edX platform somewhere in the world. The platform itself, not counting the content, but the software itself has been translated into 55 different languages, including Arabic, and it supports right-to-left languages. And it's been deployed in 116 different countries around the world. I'll apologize in advance. I have a bit of a cold, so if I cough, apologies for that. So the Open edX platform is free to use and open source, but I think it's important to talk a little bit about what free really means in this context. It means that the software itself is free from any licensing costs. There are no paywalls associated with it, no subscriptions, and none of it is proprietary. So we find that the Open edX platform is very, very important for and adopted widely by organizations that are operating at great scale. Organizations that are servicing millions of learners, are not in a position to pay per seat licensing costs for their software. So organizations that truly scale and have massive impact are organizations that get a lot of value out of the OpenNX platform today. Free also means the 4 freedoms of open source, if you're familiar with those. The freedom to use, the freedom to study, the freedom to change, and the freedom to share your changes back with the community so that other people get value out of it. I know that we're mostly talking about OER today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how OpenEdX operates as a way to share and to measure the value of shared resources later in this talk. But sharing the fundamental software components to deliver education at scale is also extremely important and creates an opportunity similar to OER, where we can avoid duplication and increase the impact of all of our efforts by creating a shareable resource that is available to anyone in the world to use. So if you are interested or using the OpenEdX platform today, it means that you can run the platform yourself. You can use it as, it's also available via some providers in our community as a SaaS offering. So if you need to spin it up very quickly, that is an option. Talk a little bit about how we are different from other LMS systems. And, we are not a vendor, as I mentioned. Axum is a nonprofit that acts as a foundation that provides the fundamental support for the OpenEdX platform. Let's move this out of the way a little bit. Okay. And to talk a little bit about what we call open source network effects. Let me just go down a little bit further so I can actually show you this. Okay. And I think this is true in the OER space as well. But in open source projects, as our network grows through the adoption of the platform, more and more of those adopters are converted into contributors. And those contributors help increase the value of the platform by enhancing it and adding features to it. And as they do that, the platform becomes more attractive to a wider audience, and the network grows, and we go around this virtuous circle over and over again, creating more value and growing the size of the ecosystem. It's important that, at the OpenEdX project, oops, go back one, all of the code is public. We have a colleague on the panel today from GitHub. All of our code is available on GitHub, and anyone can go inspect it, download it, use it today. It is driven by community contributions. My organization, Axum, provides the fundamental support and the governance for the open source project. But we have contributors in countries around the world, from, if I try to list them out, I'll do a disservice to many countries, but we have contributors from Saudi and from the MENA region. We have contributors from Europe. We have contributors from Asia, the US, Latin America, and Europe. Our open source project is what we call an inclusive duocracy. It is driven by people who do the work. So if there are folks on the webinar who are interested in becoming participants in the open source project, I encourage you to join us. Our Slack is where most of the action happens, but it is a project that's open for you to join, collaborate with us, and to use the platform to deliver your educational content today. Okay, but I know that this particular webinar is focused on the topic of OER. So I wanted to talk about a couple ways in which the OpenEdX platform supports sharing of open educational resources, but also some important lessons that I think are generally applicable to OER. So one of the areas we've been focused on enhancing the platform over the last 6 months to a year is building what we call content libraries. In a typical LMS, you start by authoring a course. And the problem with that is that a lot of the quality content gets locked into that course and is hard to reuse and to discover. And so we've invested in kind of breaking the course apart and changing the way people author so that they start from those fundamental components of the course. And here you see, if you create a library in the Open edX platform, we have a collection of formative assessments. We have a collection of learning content in the form of video, and we have a collection of problems. Any of these resources can be shared and can be reused across courses on the Open edX platform. And that's kind of an obvious thing, an obviously valuable thing to anybody who is steeped in OER. But it allows us to do one thing that's really interesting and important, I think. This is the authoring view where people create courses in the Open edX platform. And you can imagine that you've embedded some content from your library into this structure, which becomes the course. And this red area that I have outlined over here represents a thing that we're working on currently. It's a space in the course outline where we are going to include what we call in-context metrics related to the content. And the metrics will change based on what type of content is actually being used. But the key thing is we want to put information about how successful the content is in the learning context as close to the authors of the content as possible so that they can act on it quickly. If there happens to be a problem with the content, they can address it quickly. If the content is working very well, they can amplify its impact by encouraging others to reuse it. I'll give you some examples of what we'll see in that space as we roll this out. So this is a metric that we currently measure about video watches. And it shows sort of a per 5-second point of the video, how many unique views existed. And then the darker part of the chart represents places where the video was rewatched. This is a pretty small sample in this particular graph, but I can tell you there's some interesting stories about video metrics on much larger platforms where we've identified fundamental problems in the video, like, for example, an instructor referring to a slide that wasn't actually being displayed, or writing something on a whiteboard that was illegible, where we noticed students rewatching that part of the video 10 times more than any other part of the video, and we're able to help instructors fix problems with their content. And we want to use this functionality to make that piece available as readily as possible to course authors to ensure quality. Another example is, and this actually comes out of some work with the distributed learning lab at MIT. One of their insights is that the number of correct answers on the first response as a ratio of correct responses on subsequent answers to the problem will help them quickly identify problems that they're asking learners which are unclear or poorly structured. So it's it's a canary in a coal mine that allows instructors to be able to quickly identify problems with the content. Because these libraries are hosted on our platform, we have ready access to the data. It allows us to do these sorts of deep analytics on the content. But I think that there's a lesson generally, as we think about what are the key levers for ensuring quality in anything that's open, whether it's software or open educational resources. There are two themes that I want to highlight. One is governance, having an organization that is responsible for making sure that standards are kind of maintained on an ongoing basis. For the Open edX project, Axum plays that role, ensuring that the minimum things that are required of a high quality open source project are done. And then the second one is measurement. I mean, I think it's very important, to measure what matters. So when you're thinking about how to get the most impact out of either your software or your educational resources, it's important that continuous measurement is happening. Otherwise, we can't guarantee that we're having the impact that we desire, and we can't guarantee that the quality of what we are providing meets our aspirations. Okay. And with that, I'll wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and this takes me to the belief that whenever you have an initiative, you have to back it up with either with technology or with policy or with proper governance. So OER does not mean that the quality of education will be compromised. With the proper technology and proper governance around it, I think we can make use of OER to the best level. And having a well-governed OER will take it to the next level. And also, like, OER is not only to be consumed directly without having a customized learning path for students as well. Without the right tool, without the right policy, we wouldn't be able to proceed with that. So thank you very much for that presentation. And you mentioned about GitHub. The open code is there, so that makes the floor to the next person, Juan Pablo, and I'm a consumer of GitHub myself. So the floor is yours about open sources. When we talk about GitHub, there must be the word open source coming there. So the floor is yours, Juan, to share your presentation. So please go ahead with that.
Great. Is that visible now?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. Well, I was hearing about GitHub and I was so excited and so sad that my boss cannot hear this right now because that could potentially help me get to the right places. But hello, everyone. Ramadan Mubarak. My name is Juan Pablo Flores. I'm a senior program manager at the GitHub education team. I've worked in all types of work at GitHub, from helping student developers to build communities on their schools, to learn other people how to code, to right now working on understanding the impact that AI is going to have in the future of computer science education. So a very light topic to talk about today, but as other speakers have talked in the past on this conversation, I want to start by driving you through a journey of understanding the importance that open source has in the resources, these open education resources. And what we're going to be doing is reviewing the impact that open source has, but also understanding what is below these resources that are being created, how these resources are currently being used in the platform, and then understanding how future technologies are actually consuming these resources to help you learn and develop the skills that you're looking forward to develop. That being said, let's get started with it. The whole idea of this talk is to give an overview of how open source repositories enhance learning technologies. And I think that though we give for granted that everyone knows what open source is, I would love to just get started on like what's the influence of open source right now. And when we think of open source technology, it is essentially an invisible force powering much of our digital world. From software that runs our web browsers to the cloud platforms that host our data, open source projects form the backbone of modern life. It's not just about free access to software, it's about a global community of contributors working together to solve real-world challenges. These also add some additional benefits like improved transparency and facilitating pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Consider this: an estimate 96%, and this is very opinionated, of all commercial code bases contain open source components. That means that almost everything we interact with in the digital space, from search engines to messaging apps, from cybersecurity frameworks to machine learning models, relies on openly shared and collaboratively maintained technology. And it is not just tech companies. Right now, as we speak, every one of us on this call is using open source software live. Video conferencing platforms rely on open source libraries like WebRTC for real-time communication, FFmpeg for video processing, and countless other tools that enable smooth collaboration. The devices we use, the networks we rely on, and even the encryption protocols securing our communications all stems from open source contribution. And this is the power of open source. It drives innovation while being accessible to everyone, from students and educators to researchers and policymakers. So open source is defined as software. The open source software means that source code is publicly available, allowing anyone to study, modify, and distribute it. In an educational context, this translates into collaboration, community-driven development, and continuous improvement. But open source is not just about code. It extends far beyond software development. Open source embodies a philosophy of shared knowledge, transparency, and unrestricted access to learning materials. It also includes a wide range of different disciplines that go from that support these open source projects or repositories to continue to be created and distributed. For example, we have on GitHub open source design projects that enable creatives to share assets, templates, and methodologies that can be freely adapted for various needs. In education, for example, we have a few open education resources such as textbooks, lesson plans, and online courses that empower students and teachers by providing them with high quality learning materials without financial barriers. And we even have open science initiatives that further the mission of making data sets, methodologies, and research findings publicly available, which is fostering a community that is more open to share and reflect on the results of the research that they are making. Importantly, open source thrives through diverse contributions. So we do not only have developers working in open source. We have seen a continuous growth from users that are not necessarily developers to join the platform, from educators that are helping documentation being easier to digest, designers that are making these platforms or these projects more easy to use, to researchers and writers and event organizers, and everyone is working to make this ecosystem even more strong. For those who are not familiar, GitHub is a key platform where millions of developers and these users come together to collaborate on projects ranging from small scripts to enterprise-grade applications. And in specific, the team that I work with, that is the GitHub education team, offers tools like GitHub Classroom. We offer access to thousands of dollars in free resources and tools through the Student Developer Pack. And we even offer free GitHub Enterprise to complete school so that you can get your hands on in the latest technology without having to pay for it. Something that we've learned through these years is that for the more than 7 million students that we have given probably something around like $60,000 in benefits, is that access to these resources and tools was one of the biggest barriers that they could find before. Sometimes even not having access to a credit card or some sort of formal banking system is a great barrier for you to not try a technology, or just becoming a barrier for you to learn something new. When we say open source in education, we're talking about giving students and faculty the freedom to experiment with, contribute to, and learn from real-world projects. And this not only enriches the teaching and learning experience, but also cultivates essential skills like problem solving, collaboration, and adaptability, skills that nowadays are more critical than ever in a world that is even more detailed than ever. And right now, I want to explain how open source is interacting with these education systems. And for that, we're going to be using a layers system. And the deepest side of this layer system is going to be infrastructure. So open source infrastructure is the backbone of modern education. It provides essential tools that support teaching, researching, and digital collaboration. And just like physical infrastructure, such as roads, bridges, and power grids, such as these things that form the foundation of a functioning society, open source software serves as the foundation of a resilient, scalable, and accessible online resource. As education continues to move online, the need for scalable and reliable and cost-effective infrastructure has never been greater. However, for this infrastructure to remain sustainable and continue growing, it is essential that governments and the private sector actively supports its development and its maintenance. Open source projects thrive on a collective contributions, but long-term sustainability requires funding, coordination, and investment in ongoing improvements. Public institutions can offer grants, policy incentives to encourage adoption and contribution, while companies can provide financial resources, engineering support, and research collaborations to strengthen these systems. So these particular type of projects that we talk as infrastructure for education, these go beyond just education and are part of something we call essential open source software. And this is exactly what happened with Jupyter Notebooks in the education space. Jupyter didn't start as an educational tool. Originally, it was developed as part of the IPython project. Then Jupyter was designed to help scientists and researchers to analyze and visualize data more effectively. However, as more educators discover its potential and how it made learning more interactive, Jupyter quickly found its way into the classroom, where it is revolutionizing the way that people learn to code, people learn mathematics, and even how we're doing science. Today, Jupyter notebooks are used by probably thousands of universities and schools globally, from introductory level coding courses to advanced machine learning. The ability of being able to combine this tool with education has transformed the experience, not only for teachers, but also for folks that attend to these classes. The second layer of open source is platform. And here today we have two speakers that probably are better versed on explaining the importance of open source platforms. But in essence, the way that we look at it is that the open source principles apply to classroom, to these online classroom. They not only enhance the results or the learning outcomes of students, but they can also enhance teacher satisfaction, helping retain teachers. And in countries, for example, here in the US, teacher retention is one of the biggest concerns and one of the biggest problems that the education system is having. We have platforms, for example, EDX, we already talked about it. But there's others that have also started doing more research about the impact of open sourcing their learning platform. And one great example of this is Sakai, where they designed this learning platform with input from educators and researchers to meet unique needs from NYU. And unlike proprietary solutions, Sakai offered institutions full control over the learning environment, ensuring that the digital education remains adaptable, responsive to changing educational demands. One of the often overlooked advantage of open source educational platforms is their impact on teacher satisfaction and teacher retention. And proprietary systems often dictate how educators must structure their courses, leading to a lot of frustration and inefficiency, while open source platforms like Sakai, OpenEDX, on the other hand, provide the flexibility for teachers to design the course that aligns with their teaching styles and student needs. The third piece that has been already covered a bit is open resources. And especially in a world where knowledge is one of the most valuable resources, ensuring open access to education content has become even more essential. Unlike traditional libraries or kind of like these resources that remain on digital archives, repositories on GitHub are continuously growing and evolving. And a great example of these is an open education repository led by NASA called NASA Transfer to Open Science. So NASA has been a long standing symbol for innovation, and through TOPS, it is leveraging its brand to engage the public, students, and educators in open science. By making this, they are not only getting new folks to get inspired into opening these resources or research resources, but also are getting younger generations to explore STEM fields. And this is one of the approaches that we really like, where NASA strong institutional backing into these type of like projects and education content is helping to demonstrate the value of open science, and it's helping folks to get to know more about how they can be part of it. The other piece is that folks really like being able to contribute to projects that NASA is putting out. And this has meant that this specific repository has become the central piece of a conversation where researchers who want to showcase more about what open science can become take this content and they can localize it to their own region or geographies. So in some way, even if they're not contributing with code, they're contributing by distributing the knowledge and these content repositories. And one of the interesting pieces of research that we've done is that GitHub has this thing called GitHub stars, where it is kind of like a strange metric of what a popular repository can be. Think about it as likes on a Facebook post or likes on your Instagram posts. And it turns out that the top 10 repositories by stars on the platform, all of them are education-related repositories. That goes from free code camp that is teaching newcomers how to code to even developer roadmap that is giving everyone some sort of guidance on how they can become full-time developers. And the last piece of the 4 layers that we have right now is AI tutors. AI tutors have the potential to provide students with individualized support and adjust the learning pace and needs in real time. But by making AI tutors open source, we can give educators and students greater control over their learning experiences. We want to ensure that these mentors or tutors are not only aligned with what the students are looking for, but also aligned with the specific curricula. But something that has become a big part of the conversation is how do we implement these tools responsibly? We strongly believe that AI tutors should not replace human educators, but rather enhance their ability to provide effective mentorship. And there's a lot of ethical considerations such as data privacy, algorithmic fairness, and essentially just making sure that the student's well-being is considered. So the way that this has been exposed lately is that AI has been perceived in 3 different ways. As the loom, which has to do with reducing the number of people in a needed task. So it's these machines that make textiles, as a calculator that accelerates process and boosts productivity, and the construction crane that enable us to build bigger, better, and more innovative structures. And I think like in education, we definitely need more construction cranes. The benefit of having open AI tutor systems that are currently, some of them are currently being developed on GitHub, is that they provide trust, transparency, and help people to adapt their experiences while using these tutors so that they can tailor them to their needs and not only to one single tool that serves everyone, but multiple tools that serve a specific audience. Additionally, some AI tools, for example, here, GitHub Copilot, we offer GitHub Copilot to the students and teachers for free so that they're able to use this tool to optimize kind of like their classes and for students also to get some experience on how it is like to use GitHub Copilot. And today we have hundreds of thousands of both like teachers and students using the tools. And what this is also enabling teachers is that for those that are not experience with coding, it is allowing them to get started making small modifications to platforms or the content that they have found on GitHub to tailor it for their own audiences or their own students. Today, we found teachers are becoming are trusting more on AI tools as a way as something that they can bring to the classroom. But there's still various concerns of how and when and why should we start giving, or why should we give access to these tools to our students. Last but not least, some of the benefits that we found of education-related content on GitHub. Teachers feel more empowered. The process is not someone controlling all of the content. It allows folks to modify it, download it, and respect their local context. And it gives more people agency over their data, the process, and what they're teaching. But there's still some challenges that we're facing. One of them is sustainability. How do we make sure that these resources continue to exist? Even if we just store them somewhere, that has a cost associated with it. So making sure that we're able to sustain this in the long term. Licensing is also a challenge. Finding the right license for the project might be problematic at points. Giving recognition to the people who are developing these projects. On GitHub, we created a plugin that parses citation files that allows people to get citation for when someone is utilizing the repository so that they can know and get more recognition for this content that they have put out that before, unfortunately, went unnoticed. And the last piece that probably is one of the most challenging one is defining the right governance for the content. Who can push content? Who can modify it? What is the content that we're looking for in this specific repository? And what is the process to make that a final product or make it to a pull request on GitHub? So hopefully this brought a good overview of all of the things that are happening on GitHub and understanding that open source has a role not only as an essential piece of infrastructure for education, but also is becoming more prevalent and is supporting a lot of teachers outside of, without like different different contexts to offer great resources for their students. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen, for this presentation. And like, if I want to take one word to summarize the presentation, was that we all need in all aspects of education and stuff is transparency. You mentioned transparency in the decision making, in who's doing the project and making the project, and who's contributing, who's maintaining it. So transparency is something that all educators around the world need to be to have around education systems. And we've flown in this discussion from like the World Bank, from the international perspective, maybe policy, equity perspective, to MIT, where we have like creators of the content, and to Open edX, or for the technology itself, who create those who create the technology for us to be able to consume, and to the GitHub who make a platform for the shared open sources, so we can contribute and make the sustainability or the cycle flows as we wish. So I think that with that being said, we've concluded all the presentation. We are now going to move to the panel discussion, where we're going to be sharing some questions. We will start with an open question, so anyone can take the lead and answer that question. After that, we will have specific question for everyone, so we can move to the final part of this discussion, where we conclude and take the audience questions as well. In general, let me just ask this for everyone. How do OER, or open educational resources, contribute to improve educational policy, or accessibility and equity at global scale? So we're not discussing only in Saudi Arabia, but how can we utilize OER to improve policies around education, scalability, and make it accessible by everyone, everywhere? Anyone want to contribute to that question?
I'll offer to start. That question is very near and dear to my heart. To me, it starts with actually with the practices that have attached themselves to the materials. It's necessary and important that the materials themselves are free, but the sort of cultures and practices are really the thing that I think makes the difference. And so the fact that, licenses and open education materials allow us to do things is just the starting point. And so witnessing and experimenting and learning with what it looks like to adapt, to remix, to extend, materials that start from a shared opening, I think we begin to glimpse the huge possibilities for this material, right? And in particular, I think along the lines of supporting people throughout their entire lives, where we continue to move beyond viewing like learning just happens in those years when you're in school, and how important that is to the world that we're heading into. I think these open education resource materials and practices are just fundamentally important to supporting that world.
Thank you, Kurt, for that. So basically, like education, open education is everyone's issue. So it's not, for educators themselves, not students, not regulators. So it's everyone's issue. Thanks for that. Let me just move to Kurt. Talking about the scalability and how do we ensure open educational initiatives remain sustainable while maintaining high quality education, when we talk about that?
Sorry, who was that question for? For me?
Yeah, we will remain with you. So
okay. I think that's an ongoing set of challenges, right? Philanthropic foundations help in substantially get a lot of this off the ground. But as the sort of broader movement has matured, I think there's a really important, intersecting set of roles for all sorts of institutions and structures to show up there. So I think that includes governments, that includes, schools and how they prioritize this in their work, and the incentives that we all operate with are really important as well. We touched briefly in my talk about, how to convince faculty to participate even when it's voluntary, to the extent that people can see the reason why I do this work is because I want my thinking and the research that I'm doing to have an impact in the world. Open education has so much benefit towards that bigger motivation for people. And I think tapping that intrinsic motivation for people, why we do the work that we do, because we want it to have an impact. These practices go a long way, is also really important to having this be sustainable.
Thank you very much. That touching the if we want to have a sustainable education, we have to all work on it. So let's move to Tan. I'm interested in understanding one of the priorities for the World Bank is to leverage digital transformation for human capital development. And here in Saudi Arabia, the National E-Learning Center is utilizing FutureX and RX priorities or initiatives. How do you see these initiatives to contribute to this agenda, and what strategies can other countries, either in the region or around the world, can follow?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. In fact, at our work at the World Bank, especially in the education practice, we work with a lot of countries where even the basic education level is still not yet high, right? And many children actually is still even struggling to read, for example. And we use a lot of the open resource materials, in particular the Global Digital Library, where there are a lot of stories that are being made available, on the internet, with the support from the publishers, with the philanthropies, with the government agencies, to make these storybooks available to the people. But when we look at this repository, actually, I think there's much fewer storybooks in Arabic language in comparison to, so in fact, it's maybe just 1/10 of the number of storybooks in English, for example, or maybe just 1/5 of the books that are available in French. So I think really, there's a lot of that potential that, the materials in Arabic, good materials in Arabic language would be able to be really made available to the countries that still aspire or still need to work on their even basic education. And maybe that I can just link to the OERX, materials that are being made by the kingdom. And as you could see, the examples, Ministry of Education materials is also amongst the top 5, right? Agencies that have materials that have the highest used in the platform, right? And a lot of the materials is about the teaching and courses, but I really hope that, increasingly the materials would be also made more available, for the use of the other countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That takes me to the next question for Ed in regards to the open edX and open source platforms, learning management systems, and other systems. And like what Juan mentioned, about 96% of softwares and GitHub are open source. What are the misconceptions in regard to the open source learning management systems? We usually hear that open source are not sustainable and not big enough, and they cannot be utilized. So we have to go for a commercially developed learning management system or other platforms or system for education. So what's your thought on that, the misconception about the utilization of open source for education?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. I would say the sustainability of open source projects is a continuous challenge and a place where I spend a lot of my time ensuring that the Open edX platform is well maintained and sustained. And I think it's something because platforms like Open edX are really digital public goods that serve the entire world and allow us to distribute education at scale, that it's a place where we really need to solve the funding model for open source. So as an example, I think Germany is kind of a leader in this space. They have something called the Sovereign Tech Fund, which they identified open source software. And as Juan mentioned, even the proprietary software that we pay for is highly dependent on open source software. The software that our governments run is highly dependent on open source software. And Germany recognized that it was incumbent upon them to ensure that this software was safe to use and well maintained. So they created a fund to ensure that that was the case. In the case of Open edX, Axum again provides the fundamental support, but we're constantly working with and trying to activate our community to contribute resources and funding to ensure not only that the open source platform is sustained, but that it is innovative, that we can actually keep it growing and ensure that it is not just an option, but the best option for delivering education at scale.
Thank you, Edward, for that. And we will stay with you to discuss the like AI is a big topic now. So, and some people see the utilization of AI within open source platforms is playing a vital role in moving it to the next stage. So AI-powered educational tools are being utilized within open source. How do you see the future of AI-powered tools within the open source? What's going to be the effect on these tools?
Yeah, I think that eventually that the effect of these tools is going to be transformational on most of what we do, including how we teach and how we learn. I think we're at a moment of such rapid change that it's really hard to predict which tools are actually going to be the ones that are most useful for us. So in that, with that lens, the Open edX platform has been focused on integrating with innovative AI tools rather than becoming an AI tool on its own. So allowing organizations to use APIs and plugins to help authors classify their content against a taxonomy, to help analysts figure out insights from a mountain of data that's available in the platform. And I would also note that what open source means in the AI context is also extremely complicated. The software that builds the model may be fully open source. The content that becomes the model may or may not be fully open, and you may not actually be able to tell which content went into building that model. So I would just say it's the debate about what open source AI is not resolved yet. That's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, also like making the context of AI is an important thing that we need to know. So like it's not only just using the AI itself, but making use cases for each like practice that we need to consider. So let's move to you to discuss the shared repositories with GitHub. So we know that not all institutions, not all educators have the same level of like financial capabilities. So how can we leverage open source or GitHub shared resources to make sure that we bridge the gap between well-funded organization and less funded part of the world in that regard?
Totally. At least from the GitHub side of the house, because this is a problem that has multiple pieces, right? But from the GitHub side of the house, we've been actively supporting teachers and institutions to being able to use open source and being able to not only to use, but also to get more involved in open source in a way that it doesn't represent a cost for them. And we do that through like multiple programs and different verification processes that we have to make sure that we're able to give access to these resources. And I think overall, there's a combination of some of the things that we've talked with people that are not super familiar with technology, but are starting to use, for example, things like Gen AI, is that it gives them at least a little confidence of like what the technology is doing and how they can use it, even if they're not the IT expert in their school, or if there's any IT expert on their schools. It can give them a little bit of guidance on how to utilize the tool in a way that they can be more autonomous without necessarily having, like, unfortunately, IT talent on their school. I would still recommend having, like, if possible, someone mentoring them and guiding them through the process if possible. But the simple idea for me is that with these changes that we're seeing, and I think what Edward mentioned is so true, AI research papers in education go obsolete in 6 months just because of the new technologies and the new models. I think with these rapid changes, we're also seeing more people that are non-tech related being able to get started at least with coding and understanding the fundamentals. So in the long term, hopefully seeing how they can implement some of these resources locally would be something that we are pretty much like starting to see, but also that we see teachers are actively getting more involved in.
Thank you for that. And we will stay with you just to explain more about the infrastructure that you mentioned. How can we utilize that in making sure that accountability and trust in open source tools are utilized? I mean, how can we utilize that framework to make sure that there is an accountability and trust in the open source repositories for educational providers?
So a lot of that is ensuring that open source on itself provides probably one of the largest pieces of transparency that you can get. Even if you go to like any supplier, most likely they won't be able to give you the small details on how their code is working and what it's doing on the back end and how it's processing data and where the data is being stored, right? So I think open source by default already includes the transparency piece. There's still, I would say, like one of the biggest concerns that I would have is security. And we've seen this with supply chain attacks to like open source projects where someone is able to introduce some malicious code. GitHub in that side is doing a lot of effort in providing free security tools for open source projects, so that if we're able to find malicious code or we're able to find code that shouldn't be on the platform, we're able to act before, sometimes even before it gets merged to the main repository. And we talk with maintainers of these repositories so that they're able to act proactively on how can they improve the security of their projects. So there's, in the way of transparency and accountability, I think that a lot of that work is, first of all, understanding that most of the time maintainers are volunteers. And they're doing this work because they love supporting education and they love this. And being able to provide more, as Edward mentioned before, like provide more resources in any way possible, from financial support to just having engineers volunteer to help open source projects to become better, represents a huge benefit for these maintainers. And at the end, the last beneficiaries are both teachers and students that end up using these resources.
Thank you, and keep up the good works, because we've been utilizing these materials in open source, I mean, for the benefit of everyone. So let's move to your time again. So OER and as a tool for democratizing education, how can the World Bank help us taking this OER to put it within the policies, within the government's, the educational policies? How can we make sure that local and international policies around education make sure that OER is involved in our education systems?
Sure, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, I think we very much take the shared knowledge at the heart of our work, right? And a lot of materials or a lot of knowledge or our experience, we actually as I said, and we all put it on the internet, and for countries to really consider and use. But I think in our work, one thing that came out is also like how to also encourage the educators to also kind of use the materials and see the benefits of the materials. And the examples that I cited earlier on storybooks is really where in countries we encourage the educators, the teachers to actually take the stories that are made available, but then kind of really work together in a community to come up with maybe like 3 questions that will help the students, to gauge whether they actually can read the story well, but also, be able to assess their comprehension, for example. So there is a not just as a consumption of the materials made, but also actually using these materials in their day-to-day teaching. So just to give an example that building this opportunity for the educators to actually use the materials specifically in their day-to-day work is very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Kurt, we'll move to you again. And I think I'll utilize one question that has been mentioned in the Q&A in regards to the utilize it in the use of Gen AI for open OER creation and increasing the 60% that you mentioned of people who are creating the content, while making sure that the content is reliable and available to everyone. How can what do you think the role of Gen AI on this, and how can we utilize it in the best way?
Yeah, I think I share, Ed, you expressed the scope and scale of transformations that we're kind of on the cusp of. And I think, we haven't even started to see probably what some of the ultimate results will be. I am aware of a lot of people, teachers, faculty who are experimenting with this, with different types of policies and approaches. And I think this sort of broad experimentation is going to be playing out for a while. I've had very interesting conversations with other open ed colleagues in the United States, for instance, from the community college system, which are relatively under-resourced. These are faculty who they have a course load of like teaching 5 classes per semester, and and their budgets are getting cut all the time. And so they're going to use these tools as a survival mechanism, frankly, and kind of deal with the challenges that they're facing and hopefully make the best of it. I also look for these tools to fundamentally sort of shift the way that people interact with knowledge in the world. The world of like typing in a search and getting some links and going straight to the source material and having to sort of sort through, do I trust that or not? A bunch of that work, which is on us as individuals, is going to find their way into these models. And so, we're putting a lot of attention, and I see the open education community in general putting a lot of attention in signaling preferences to make that go as well as we can. The Creative Commons, among others, is doing some really important work, convening those conversations and figuring out what sorts of attribution and traceability back to this source is there. We've noticed that ChatGPT showed up in our Google Analytics results for our website explicitly August last year, and quickly rocketed to be our #1 referral source that's not social media or Google. I've played around with it. I say, I did pretty good at math in high school. How should I learn linear algebra? And it does a really nice job of referencing people to, open courseware materials. I think that is only going to continue. So we're going to have to be partners with this new alien life form that's taking shape with us, and it'll be really interesting.
Thank you, Kurt. I think one of the the concepts that they're trying to, being introduced with Gen AI is the reasoning models. So they want AI to be wise. So we want to make sure that AI does not, go faster than us and becomes wiser than us. Because at one stage, it will create the content, be wiser enough to create the content that is being trusted by those who want to consume OER. So we need to act as enabler for this, not only consumers. So we have to be in that context and create more. You said it's going to refer to your website. That's because of the quality of resources that it's finding. It's trying to build reasoning.
I hope that's referencing because of the quality. I mean, I feel a little bit humble. I want to be humble about how good a job we've been doing about identifying quality resources before there was generative AI. It was difficult to know how to trust and interpret our source materials for centuries, really, right? And so this is just putting a different kind of tool in our hands, but we've always relied on critical thinking and our capacity to discern what's important and what's going on. And I don't think that's going to change. It will take different forms, but the foundational thing that we need to be able to do as people to discern what's important, what to lift up, won't disappear.
Yes, what I meant is that it's giving another venue of accessing your resources. So for like more accessibility from different people who are using Gen AI, not using other resources, not direct access. So they will be able to assess and make sure it's usable and evaluate. So giving a larger base of number who are using. So we will see what the future holds, and the future we're talking about days, like with Gen AI. Every day we're seeing a change, but we're big believers of like educators and technology providers like you guys and policymakers who want to put policies around that. We're looking for a brighter future for our education. So that wraps up all the questions. And any final thoughts from anyone want to share before we hand over to Zaid to wrap up the conversation? Any final thoughts?
So to jump in. First of all,
Yes.
thank you all for inviting us. It's been amazing to get to hear from everyone, and I think there's a very strong case to talk more about open education resources, and I'm just really happy of all of the work that has been done from all of these different organizations as we navigate such a rapid changing times with everything that is going on in Gen AI and other contexts. So thank you so much for inviting.
Thank you. And I think we've shared thoughts from different perspectives, different parts of the world, just for only one very reason: open education, or education for everyone. So we will need to keep up these initiatives. We need to work closely, regardless of the technological, barriers. And whatever we think was not available to us centuries ago, it's available now. So we have to work closely to make sure a brighter future for everyone. So with that all being said, the floor is yours, Zaid. And it's been my pleasure to be moderating this session with this distinguished guest. I've learned a large deal myself, and looking forward to seeing you again.
The unfolding conversation and sharing of ideas during today's session have acted as a powerful display of the transformative potential inherent in shared knowledge and active engagement. We are deeply appreciative for your presence, which contributed greatly to the dynamic nature of our discussions. It is our sincere hope that the insights and perspectives delivered throughout the session provided practical value and deepened understanding for each participant. Our gratitude extends to Dr. Saleh Al-Harbi, whose moderation skills navigated us through this webinar discussion, and our esteemed panelists whose expertise significantly enriched our dialogue. Equally, the active participation of every attendee has been integral to the success of this discussion. As we close, we turn our focus to continual improvement and growth. A survey link has been made available in the chat section, and we invite you to share your feedback and suggestions. This input is crucial as we strive to elevate our content and ensure future sessions are even more impactful. In conclusion, your time and attention have been greatly appreciated. We eagerly anticipate your participation in future discussions where we will continue to explore exciting and relevant topics. For now, from all of us at the National E-Learning Center, I'm Zaid Al-Ragib. Goodbye.